Welcome. We'll start with the summary for Yojana January. Now this is a very special issue. It focuses on banking reforms. It's very important both for your objective as well as subjective papers. Now we already have some of the symbols that we have already discussed. The first one stands for important for subjective answers, important for objective answers, and the videos that we have already covered. So throughout this lecture you would find the various signs that would help you understand the concept. Now coming on to the next issue you would have is the public grievance redressal that will focus in February. Now when we talk about money, let's start about the history. Previously there were no banks, so where do people used to keep their money? They used to either keep gold as one of the treasures. There was no currencies that existed, and those gold coins or silver coins were either buried in the home or kept in pots. Later on the concept of banking started. So all the finances basically moved from home to banks, and when they moved to banks, banks were interested in gaining more interest rates, so banks started lending out money. Now in some areas in the world, if you witness, there was the problem of non-performing assets that were there. Since banks were giving loans and that the repayment of the loans were poor and there were non-performing assets that were gaining up, what happened was there was a need to nationalize the banks, and that idea of nationalization came in India in 1969, where 14 banks were nationalized. Later on there were 8 more banks that were nationalized in 1980s. Now this whole banking system initially started with small diversified banks. Later on they were basically siphoned up by bigger banks, and you had, let's say, State Bank of India, which became a major bank. So you had few reforms that came up. The first important reform was the Narasimham Committee. Narasimham Committee on banking reforms is very important because it talked about nationalization of bank, and that was important to remove the non-performing assets, to check out the issues of cyber security, so to make economy a kind of cashless economy and a move towards digitalization of the banks. Now when we talk about the banking sector reforms, we need to ensure that there are some regulations that are there. Now these regulations came through the nationalization. Now the nationalization initially came with the deposits of more than 50 crores, and this controlled 80% of the bank branches. So what was important for the functioning of a financial market? To have a good and smooth functioning of a financial market, the size was important, the resilience was important, and moreover the level of capitalization was very important. So these were some of the important aspects that were discussed, and then later you had the low entry barrier that was talked about, easy entry for the banks, then bringing in financial supervision, dynamic corporate debt market. So all those were kind of measures that were taken to move banking system or to reform the banking system. Now Narasimham Committee, as we already talked about, focused on nationalization. Then the idea was reducing the statutory liquidity ratio and the cash reserve ratio. We have already covered this in our class on NCERT economics. So if you have doubts about the terminology, just go back to the class and refer it. The idea was again to rely on the market force and allow private banks to enter into the system more easily. So far it was only the public sector banks that existed, and gradual entry for the private banks was then allowed. Similarly, to the Narasimham Committee, you had the JP Nayak Committee. The idea of JP Nayak Committee was to enhance the system of governance and to bring in management of the public sector banks. So those two were the basic ideas of the JP Nayak Committee. Now, as we said, the Narasimham Committee came and it talked about reducing the CRR and the SLR, but later on this committee again came up in 1998. And in 1998, the issues that it discussed were basically talking about capital adequacy, the bank mergers, use of more technology, and professional management of the banks, specifically with the public sector banks. So public sector banks should be more professional in nature. So those were the ideas that were brought up in the recommendations of Narasimham Committee that came in 1998. Now when we talk about public sector banks, These banks contribute to nearly 70% of the overall asset. So if we talk about the global picture, the major share is the public sector banks. So public sector banks are indeed important, and they are again the largest contributors of non-performing assets. So non-performing assets is not something which is good for a bank. So higher the non-performing assets, more is the bank into trouble, we can say simply. So what happened was, the non-performing assets of the public sector banks increased from 2.75 lakh crore to 7.33 lakh crore. That was a huge amount. Now, since there was huge amount of non-performing assets, there was huge amount of the stressed assets that were seen, and these stressed assets were nearly 16% for public sector banks, and this was 3 times much higher than the private sector banks. So public sector banks were facing two main difficulties. First was the non-performing assets with them, and second was the stressed assets that they had. So again, the profit after tax contracted during 2016-17. So there was a kind of huge reform that was required, and this came up as Indradhanush. Now Indradhanush plan was a plan for bank recapitalization, where government put in the money into the banks to bring the bank out of the loans of the non-performing assets and of the stressed assets, and so that they can have a smooth functioning again. So that was the idea under Indradhanush plan, which was released in 2015 and 16. Now you have the Basel III requirements. This is again very important for your objective purpose. Basel III will come into force in January 2019, and when it will come into force, it would be a kind of difficult check for the banks, because it would bring in more room for growth capital of the banks. So that's again a very important aspect that we need to understand. Besides these, there have been numerous courts and numerous bodies that have come up. So you have the Insolvency Board, the IBBI that was established. So you have the Insolvency and the Bankruptcy Code that came up. Then you had the creation of Central Repository of Information on Large Credits for Stressed Assets. So that was again very important. Again, the deposit money bank assets to GDP ratio is 69% for India, which is very less as compared to China, where it stands for 153%, and Japan with 166%. So China and Japan have a huge deposit money bank asset to GDP ratio and compared to India. So India needs to definitely work on it. Now, we talked about the nationalization of banks. Nationalization occurred in 1969 and 1980. Later on, in 1991, only 14 licenses were granted for the universal banks to be established. However, if we compare this to US, it is a huge difference, because in United States, you have nearly 130 new banks that are chartered every year between the period of 1976 to 2009. So that was a huge proportion for United States, but when it comes to India, it's just 14 banks. So definitely banking sector needs to improve. Now different countries adopted different mechanisms for strengthening the banking system. China talked about recapitalization as we did. Besides that, it talked about strengthening the financial regulation, corporate governance, and bringing in transparency. South Korea on the other hand created Financial Supervisory Service after the East Asian financial crisis that took place in 1990s. So under the Indradhanush plan, there were three main things that India did. The first was making the banks more competitive, so bringing in on-tap policy for more competition and innovation to be promoted. Developing corporate bond markets, so liquid and deep bond markets will enable the firms to have to get over the debt that is existing, and the Independent Bank Board Bureau would be created, and it would generate more employment opportunities for the bank officials. So these three were the key elements that were released under the Indradhanush plan. Later on, you had the Indradhanush 2.0 that we are talking about, that we will discuss further. Now the next topic that we would be discussing is protagonist to economic transformation. Now for the first time, the per capita dollar income of a country will touch 2000 mark. That is a kind of huge expansion both in terms of domestic consumption and improving the affordability of the people of India. Again, the deposit penetration has increased to 60% from merely 35%. So more persons now have more deposits in hand. the credit intensity has doubled to 45% of the GDP during this same period, that's during the period of 1997 to 2007. Again, the deposit and credit ratio with respect to GDP has increased significantly. The outstanding credit of the private sector banks has also increased. So definitely India is going ahead in terms of the factors that affect the economic transformation. So there are three types of factors that we usually talk about. The first is the vintage. Vintage talks about the point of sale machines. So these point of sale machines, the private sector banks have registered a huge growth as compared to the public sector banks. Again, there are more diversification of income that is seen as compared to the share of total income. The next is productivity and agility. When we talk about productivity, we analyze the cost to the income ratio, and when we talk about agility, we talk about flexibility in the hiring mechanisms. So those are the important three aspects. The next is we talk about a next generation banking with the idea of 4Ds. That's very important. So please note this carefully. This idea of 4D says that India would turn out to be the fourth largest economy by 2025. Now what are the 4Ds that we focus on? The first is development when we talk about financial inclusion. The next is deregulation where we improve the financial intermediations that occur. The next is demographics. We have more digitally equipped youth and young population. The last is disruption. So with digitization and integration of the banking system, the issues of disruption would go down. So those are the four issues that we need to focus when we talk about next generation banking. Now what are the transformations in the banking that have come up? We are moving towards cashless banking. So we are moving towards branchless banking. We do not want more branches now. We are talking about innovative use of ATM machines. So far India has only 11 ATMs per 1 million population. The same in Malaysia is 52. So India needs to have more ATM penetration specifically into the rural areas. The next is infrastructure financing where we talk only 5% from India is in the global infrastructure market, and we can rise it definitely to 9 to 10%. That's a pretty good figure. We aim to bring in new models for medium small scale industries. So MSMEs contribution is again important. Then we talk about JAM Trinity, that's Jan Dhan Yojana where you have the bank accounts for everyone. You have the Aadhaar scheme and linking the mobile phones. So these three being linked together is known as JAM Trinity. And finally is the competition and consolidation where we talk about the portability of account number, big data analytics, that's very important and we'll discuss it further in this lecture. And finally is the securitization of the retail loans. So these three come under the competition and consolidation. So these are some of the transformational banking reforms that we focus on. Now when we talk about managing the non-performing assets, it's really a big challenge for India. India has significant amount of non-performing assets. So the idea is to borrow lead to creation of demand for basically the various resources that we have. Now what are the things that we look into? The first is the gross non-performing assets. Those are around 8.4 lakh crores in September 2017. Then we figure out the bad loans from there. We figure out the stressed advance loans. We talk about improving the balance sheet. We talk about bringing in project completions at par. So removing any kind of delay in project completion. Talking about poor recovery of the receivables, business failures that occur and the borrowed funds that are being talked about. So the idea is again to check out the willful defaults. Now how it is done? So you have it's entrusted to a senior fraud investigation officer and the punishment is 6 months to 10 years along with a fine, and if the fraud involves a kind of public finance or public interest, the imprisonment will not be less than 3 years. So that's again very important, the term of imprisonment. That's important definitely for your objective questions. Now how do the various laws enable the banks to recover the default amount? So you have various laws. The first is the RDD BFI Act. The next is Sarfarazzi Act. Now Sarfarazzi Act is very important. It allows the bank to take possession of the assets charged to the bank without intervention of the court. So if a person is found as defaulter, under the Sarfarazzi Act you can basically take the possession of his charged property that is being registered. Now there was a case that was registered, Deepak Narang versus the state of Haryana in 2006, and in this case it was found that the harassed AGM of Allahabad was rescued and the magistrate who admitted the FIR was ordered or charged. Now again, there have various cases, and so far there are nearly 64,519 properties that have been seized under the Sarfazi Act. The government is also amending the act to make it mandatory for the district collector to hand over the physical possessions to the bank when the application is made under any authorized officer. Similarly, there is a case study of an industrialist of Ludhiana on page 17 of this Yojana. That's really important for your ethics paper, so just have a look onto it. The next topic that we will move on to is the insolvency and the bankruptcy code, and this insolvency and the bankruptcy code we have already covered one video on it. So just go through it. There has been a kind of software that is being prepared by D2K Technologies, and that basically predicts 1 year in advance with 80% confidence the amount of insolvency or bankruptcy that could occur using artificial intelligence. So that's really very important, based in Bombay. Now the next is the recapitalization. So as we said, under recapitalization what we aim to do is all the non-performing assets we need to reach 10% of the loans and the advance recently. Then you have the strengthening of the banks to create more jobs, more employment opportunities and more investment options. The next idea is, of the total money that is put into the recapitalization, that's 2.1 lakh crores, nearly 18,000 crore is from budgetary support, 58,000 comes from equity issuance, and last 1.35 lakh crore comes from the issue of bank recapitalization bonds. So that's the bifurcation of this recapitalization amount is really important. So what the government will do is, government will issue bonds and sell it directly, or banks can subscribe to it directly. Further, the banks can sell it into the secondary market. Government does not prohibit that, and definitely if the bank again sells it, it would enhance the capital base of the bank. There are 12 big tickets of NPA accounts worth 2.25 lakh crores that are being referred to RBI under the National Company Law Tribunal Act in June 2017. Now with this there is an idea of haircut. So bank have to take an haircut of 60% worth. Now what is haircut? Haircut is the difference between the loan amount and the actual value of the asset that is used as a collateral. So let's say my loan amount is 5,000 and the actual value of the asset of the collateral is 4,000. Now that difference is known as the haircut difference, and this haircut difference can be classified into 4 categories. It is deep if it is more than 75%, it's aggressive if it is 50 to 75%, mainly in the case of metal and construction industries. It's moderate, that's 25 to 50% in case of power sector, and finally it's marginal when it's less than 25%. So that's the categorization of haircut. Now the next is, how do we facilitate the idea of financial inclusion? Recently we have heard a lot on financial inclusion, but it's not of recent that we talk about financial inclusion. This concept has been going on since long. So it started with the nationalization of SBI, the State Bank of India, in 55. Then the nationalization of bank in 69 and 80. Then you had the RBI and NABARD, which extended the banking across India under the various microfinancing initiatives. In 2005, you had the Know Your Customer. Thus, Know Your Customer was basically simplification of the existing rules. In 2011, we talk about the total households and the rural households, and from the rural households, only 54% have access to formal banking sector. So there is a huge way to go around for the formal banking in the rural areas. In 69, we had only one bank branch for 3 lakh people. So we need to improve on the number of bank branches. As a result, you had the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana that came in 2014 that talked about bringing in or opening up more bank accounts in the rural areas, or basically an account for every household. By 6 December 2017, nearly 30.7 crore new accounts have been opened, of which 18 crore lie in rural areas, 12 crore nearly in urban areas. There has been a huge penetration of RuPay cards, the Kisan credit cards, increase in the credit in urban areas and northeast regions. Then you had the biometric enabled handheld devices which have been used in the rural areas for cash withdrawal. Now we would focus on another important topic that is very important for this edition is bankers to the bank, and that is the Reserve Bank of India. So above all banks you have the Reserve Bank of India, which is also known as banker to the bank. After 1949 it was fully owned by Government of India. Initially it had offices in Kolkata, Chennai, Mumbai, Rangoon, Karachi, Lahore and Kanpur, but after Burma was separated you had the Rangoon branch that was succeeded and you had the Central Bank of Burma that was formed. Similarly, Lahore and Karachi moved out from RBI and you had the State Bank of Pakistan which was formed after the division of India. Now the aim of RBI is to issue currency, issue notes, secure monetary stability, release the monetary policy of India, operate currency and credit system in India. And under the monetary policy, what does RBI talk about? It talks about maintaining first of all the price stability. So the idea is to promote growth. In 2016 there was an amendment that was released for flexible inflation which targeted a specific framework, and this set inflation target was once in every 5 years with an idea to supply clean and genuine notes into the market. Similarly, RBI acts as a regulator, so it looks on to various things. It protects the depositors' interest accounts, then it develops banking operations, ensure good health of a banking system in India. It talks about universal bank licensing policy. In 2014, there were two new banks that came up. One was the IDFC Bank, another was Bandhan Financial Services Private Limited. Then you have management of stressed assets, review of the governance of board of banks, regulating the cooperative banks, regulating non-banking financial institutions, and consumer protection and education by the use of consumer redressal cell in 2016. In 1995, you had a banking ambassador scheme that was released. This was an alternate dispute redressal mechanism for resolving any kind of disputes that occurs between the bank and the customer. So you have bank on one side and customer on one side, and any kind of dispute between the two would be resolved using the banking ambassador scheme. So that was again important. That was later revised in 2006. Then you have the formulation of Charter of Customer Rights for the banks. Under this, what all rights come up? So you have right to fair treatment, transparency, fair and honest dealing, suitability, privacy and grievance redressal. So those are the things that we focus under the charter. The next was creating an educative microsite for public awareness in the name of Paisa Bolta Hai. Then again you had numerous efforts where you talked about Payment and Settlement Systems Act 2007, Payments and Settlements Regulation 2008. Then you talk about management of public debt, transfer of electronically routed computerized systems through the eKuber system. So it facilitated the bank monitoring of all the fund systems that come into. So eKuber is again very important, where all the transfers are electronically routed. The next is resolving insolvency. As we said, we have already covered a detailed class on that, so you can definitely refer that. It would be more helpful than this. Now the next is the ease of doing business ranking. India has improved 30 points from 136 positions to 103 position. Now with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the idea is insolvency, when does it arise? It arises when the firm is unable to pay the dues that it has and it cannot be tackled for restructuring of the debt. In that case, you have the insolvency that come up. And insolvency, basically before this Insolvency Act of 2016, you had numerous acts. For example, the Presidency Town Insolvency Act 1909. Then you have the Provincial Insolvency Act 1920. Both of these are still functional under the section 243 of the code and provides for repealment of these enactments which has not been notified. If the insolvency resolution is for an individual, we use the Debt Recovery Tribunal. If it is for companies, then you have to go to the National Company Law Tribunal. Again, if the default is over 1 lakh, it has to go to the National Company Law Tribunal. If the resolution is completed, the resolution has to be completed within 180 days. If not, it can be extended for 90 days. But for the fast track cases, it would be 90 plus 45 days rather than 180 plus 90 days. So that's again very important. And the fast track resolution is only applicable for companies with a paid up capital of 50 lakhs or turnover of 2 crores and the startups. So here we have the link to the previous video on insolvency, you can just refer that. So all this has been covered there. Now you had a case study of SLR Mittal. SLR Mittal had a strong bid for the de-stressed asset which was Uttam Galva, which is a company under non-performing asset, and SLR Mittal is one of the promoters. So it owns 29% of the stake along with Miglanis, which is another promoter as per the Bombay Stock Exchange. So those two are really important, and this case study can be jotted down somewhere if you have been asked about the insolvency and the bankruptcy code. The next is the related party and the promoter group, the difference between the two. So when we talk about related party, it's someone who controls more than 20% of the voting rights in a distressed company, and the directors have more than 2% of the stake. So that is what is known as a related company under the insolvency and bankruptcy code. The next is the SEBI definition for promoter and promoter group. So promoter and promoter groups are those which have more than 10% of the equity and control over the running company. The next is strengthening the cyber security. So after the BHIM Act was launched in 2016, the digital transactions have boomed up from only 40,000 that existed to nearly 82 lakh transactions per month. So that's a huge increase. Now this BHIM has gone Aadhaar enabled. So BHIM Aadhaar is a digital payment acceptance solution which requires Aadhaar authentication. So our banking system is at the verge of cyber security, and it's very important to have good cyber security for our banking systems. So what are the steps that are required? So what are the stakeholders? So either it would be the customer or the originator, where you would provide the password or the PIN. The next is the originating institution and the beneficiary institution. Both of this try to maintain the consistency, accuracy and trustworthiness of the data. You have the processing agency. These are either NPCI in Mumbai or IDBRT, that's Institute of Development of Research in Banking Technology, Hyderabad. So either of these two form the processing agency, and finally you have the beneficiary which share the correct IFSC code or the VPA, that's the virtual permanent address, that is, for example, phone number at the rate of UPI, the phone that is registered with your banking system. So that's again very important. The next is the National Cyber Security Policy 2013. Now this is important for your subjective papers, so make sure you understand and cover this thoroughly. The idea under the National Cyber Security Policy 2013 is to create a secure ecosystem, assurance framework for IT, encourage open standards, bring in regulatory framework, create mechanism for security threat, bring in National Computer Emergency Response Team, e-governance, protection of infrastructure facility that are being created, bringing in more research and development, and finally is the HRD through education and training. The next is Cyber Swachhata Kendra, that talks about botnet cleaning and malware analysis. We have talked about botnets and malwares in our class on digital analysis, so just refer that class. You will have more ideas about what is botnet, what is malware there, the types of malware. So some of the methods that have come up are M-Kavach. We have already talked about this in the previous class on Yojana. It's just a repetition, and since it is a repetition, it's important for your examination. So you have USB Pratirod, that controls unauthorized removal of the USB drive. The next is Samvid app, that is a desktop based whitelisting application for Windows. M-Kavach, that is security for Android mobile phones, and Browser JS Guard, that is a browser extension which detects the malicious HTML entities. The next is Information Technology Act 2000. Now it talks about the digital signatures, digital governance, dispatch of electronic records, securing electronic records, regulating the certifying authorities and the electronic certifications. Now there are various offences that are included. For example, hacking, which falls under section 66 with 3 years of imprisonment and 5 lakh of fine. Receiving a stolen computer under section 66G with 3 years of imprisonment and 1 lakh of fine. Then you have using someone's password under section 66C, which talks about 3 years of imprisonment and 1 lakh of fine. So those are some of the offences that we talk about. The next issue that we would discuss about is the RBI's concept of zero liability and limited liability. So under zero liability, we talk about any of the fraudulent transactions that occur, and under the limited liability, we talk about any of the transactions that occur against any of the frauds. So again we talk about phishing, which is an attack to steal the user data, the login credentials or the credit card number. So that's what is phishing. So sometimes you can have a direct question on what is phishing, how it is different from botnet malware. So all those terminologies are really important, specifically the digital terminologies related to banking in India. The next was the rural banking transforming India. So when we talk about rural banking, we started in 1976 with the regional rural banks. India still has nearly 25% unbanked adults and 2/3 of the South Asian population that do not have a bank account. So we have again 31 crore people who are potentially bankable but do not have good facilities of banking that is available. Again, in the rural areas, there is income irregularity, there is expenditure irregularity. So either of those cases, we have the banks which have high non-performing loans in the rural areas that are being taken into account. So what we try to do is, we try to develop inclusive rural financial systems which talks about product strategy, processes, partnerships, protection, profitability, productivity and people. Again, we talk about the financial inclusion that took place in 2005. So you had the K.C. Chakrabarty, who was the chairman of Indian Bank, and the first village in India to provide all banking facilities to all household was the Mangalam village. That's again very important. The next is facilitating the general credit cards, Kisan credit cards. Himachal Pradesh, Kerala and Puducherry announced 100% financial inclusion in all the districts. Then you had the RBI 2020 vision that talked about nearly 600 million new customer accounts that should be opened up. So you had the business correspondents that came up, the information and communication technology that was brought into. Some of the steps involved bringing in Jan Dhan Yojana, the Mudra scheme for microcredit facilities. You had the social sector reforms with the life insurance schemes. The banking sector reforms by banking correspondents. You have Aadhaar enabled micro ATMs, JAM Trinity, direct benefit transfer to direct account, removing any kind of intermediaries, priority sector lending, that was again important. Now under Mission Indradhanush, some of the reforms that have taken place under different sectors. So first is the appointment. So you have a separate post for a chairman and a managing director. The Bank of Board Bureau has come up, capitalization under Basel III norms to meet the Basel III norms. De-stressing the public sector banks, you have the disclosure of non-performing assets, empowering the accounts, bringing in more accountability, bringing in reforms in governance by means of insolvency and bankruptcy code and recapitalization of public sector banks and consolidation of banks. So you had the merger of six SBI associate banks and the Bharatiya Mahila Bandhan Bank. So Bharatiya Mahila Bank and the 6 SBI associate banks have been merged into SBI. So you have the consolidation of banks that is coming up. And Indradhanush 2.0, as we said, is a further version of Indradhanush plan where we talk about recapitalization to make sure that they remain solvent and there is no insolvency that occurs, and we comply to the global Basel III norms. So Basel III norms again very important. Then we will talk about some specialized banks. So you have Exim Bank that talks about export import, established in 1992. You have the NABARD Bank. NABARD Bank was a part of National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, which came into existence in 1982. You had the National Housing Bank that came into existence in 87. You have the SIDBI, that is the Small Industries Development Bank of India, which was set up in 1990s. And the next is the Bharatmala Pariyojana. We have already covered it in a separate class on YouTube, so you can go and refer that. Just a brief outline, Bharatmala is a kind of modification over the National Highway Development Program that was started in 1998. It talks about the origin and destination. So there are 6 components that go through: economic corridors, inter-corridors, feeder corridors. All these we have discussed in that class. Here we are just putting down the names again. So you have the National Corridor Efficiency Improvement, border and international connectivity of roads, coastal and port connectivity and Greenfield Express. So under phase 1 you had nearly 24,800 kilometers of roads that are planned. The impact is basically on the efficient movement of traffic, developing corridors, connecting 550 districts and creating investment facilities, bringing in more transit facilities and having a positive impact on the logistics. The next is the credit rating of India. Now there are two main organizations that provide the credit rating. One is Moody's and other is S&P Standard and Poor. So you have the Standards and Poor rating that was not upgraded for India, but the Moody's rating was upgraded from Baa3 to Baa2. Now for China, the S&P rating has been downgraded from A plus to AA negative. So from a stable to kind of negative, and for India it has remained the status quo, that is BBB negative, and that shows it is on a stable front. However, Moody's rating has moved India from positive to stable. So different ratings provide in different feedbacks. However, we believe that these ratings are not fair and India is not correctly rated on the international credit rating agencies. Now what is the benefit of being rated? The benefit is we are basically bringing in more credit worthiness of the borrowers. So you have more foreign investment that can come in. You can have more financial, macroeconomic and stability of indicators that can come in. Then again, you have the various programs that were introduced recently like GST, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, raising the FDI limit, good performance at ease of doing business. All of this promoted India under the Moody rating, but this could not help India improve on the S&P rating. Now Moody rating and S&P rating are working on different aspects. So Moody basically examines the expected losses which are part of the likelihood of the defaults. However, S&P mainly takes into account the credit worthiness of the borrowers. So these indicators try to include the external debt to the GDP ratio, the GDP growth, GDP per capita, FDI inflow, the fiscal current account deficit and the default history of an economy. So all this are taken into account under the credit rating. Now when we release the Make in India, we have nearly 25 potential sectors that can generate nearly 100 million of jobs. And by this there can be increase of India's GDP share to 25% by 2020. And what we try to do under Make in India is we try to make the environmental approvals much easier, incentives to MSMEs. Then we talk about labor law reforms, ease of FDI norms and so on. We also talk about FRBM, that's the fiscal responsibility and budget management, that is committed to decrease the debt to the GDP ratio to below 60% by 2023. So that's again one of our goals. India has definitely worked very well on the forex reserve. So we have the forex reserve that has increased significantly over the past 10 years. However, despite of these, the ratings have not gone up as it should be. So what we need to do is, under the various acts that were released, you had the incentives for the ease of doing business. So under the ease of doing business, we talked about 24/7 that works all the day round, e-business portals. We talk about reducing the corporate rate from 30% to 25% in next 4 years. We talk about new bankruptcy laws, 50 amendments to the company acts that have been proposed, enabling the registration of company in 1 day rather than 15 to 20 days that used to take place previously. We talk about more NRI investments which are treated as Indian investments, more of FDI inflows. So all those and the statistics related to that has been put up here. This is important when you try to substantiate your answers with some facts and figures, so you can definitely utilize that. These would be available at the handouts and current affairs section based on Yojana, so you can go through that. The next important topic is big data analysis. Now what is big data analysis? We try to examine the various large and varied data with the help of the organizations for a much informed business outlook. So let's say if you are running a business and you want to take out the number of customers that lie within 5 kilometers of the range, those lie beyond 50 kilometers of the range and so on. So those data can be picked using the big data analytics. It helps to understand and target the correct customers. Many of the companies like Walmart, Netflix, US government, recently the US and India elections used big data analysis. We are trying to bring this into the banking sector recently. So it aims to improve the science, research, healthcare, optimizing the cities and the countries and improving the security systems. So for the Indian banking system, if we use the big data analytics, where all we can use, we can talk about the credit scores, the loans, the spending patterns, the saving balances, the available credit that the people have, and the income and the expenditure patterns. So all those can be taken into account. The next term which is very important is identinomics. Identinomics is a term that is used in banking where the individual needs are to be known in advance rather than going into the field. So beforehand, if we know the need of an individual, based on that we can push the product that the customer needs. So once we know the need patterns, let's say during the festival season, these are all the requirements that the customer requires. So rather than going through our own will, we would push the items into the market that the customer really requires. So that is what is identinomics work on. So for that you have data collection, data storage, data analysis and utilization of data that is done. Now some of the important excerpts from the Yojana throughout. So you have India's membership for European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has been approved by the cabinet. The next is the subsidizing of the MDR charges on the debit card, credit card, BMAP and the APS transactions. The trajectory for solar generation capacity has been announced, which is 175 gigawatts for renewable energy, of which 100 gigawatt for solar generating capacity and 50 gigawatts for wind power by 2022. So that's our target. Then you have the National Nutrition Mission that we have already talked about in Kurukshetra recently, that has been set up. The various international film fare awards that have been given, film festival awards that have been given. So you have the list here, you can just refer that. The northeast states, there were few important developments. You had the Hornbill festival celebrated in Nagaland. Sometimes there is a direct question in which state this festival is celebrated. You have Turial hydroelectric power project which was released in Mizoram, and it would be, Mizoram would now be a third surplus state of northeast after Sikkim and Tripura. Then you have the approval of Northeast Special Infrastructure Development Scheme that took place. Integrated Command and Control Center projects have been established. Various schemes for women empowerment, the Global Entrepreneur Summit Scheme and the National Trachoma Survey report that says that India is now free from infective trachoma and the active rate is less than 0.7%. The WHO standards say below 10 years it should be less than 5%. So India has already met this target well ahead of time. The next is in Jammu and Kashmir. You had the construction of Eklavya model residential schools in Kulgam and Anantnag area, upgradation of hostels for Gujars and Bakarwals into residential schools in the areas of Punch, Rajouri, Kathua, Doda, Bandipur and Kupwara. The loan agreement with the World Bank for Sankalp. Sankalp is skill acquisition and knowledge awareness for livelihood promotion. So those are some of the recent developments, the small news that have come up as excerpts in the Yojana recently. With this we cover the Yojana. It was indeed a special issue, very important. As we said, every month we will be covering the summary for Yojana and Kurukshetra. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, you would have more further updates that would come on. Have a very good day ahead.